Hello and welcome to another episode of Teaching Heroes, the teaching podcast where I ask teachers and educators, what does it take every day to show up in the classroom to teach tomorrow's leaders? But I've also been doing a series of special episodes, and this week's special episode is on health and education. And who better to come onto the podcast with me than the director of Simplr Health and all-around miracle man, Dean Kilby.
Yay.
Dean, thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Intro. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So I asked Dean to come on because nearly a year ago to the day I was obese. And I had been battling with my weight my whole adult life. I would put the weight on and then I'd take it off again and put it back on and take it off. And I got to the stage where I realized I was resigned about it. And I didn't like being resigned and I wanted to do something, and through a friend found Dean and your program at Simplr Health and lost 22 kilos.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty good. And through that, transformed my whole attitude towards health. And I started to realize the impact that my poor health was having on education. And more importantly, I found my teaching got better the healthier I got. And I've started to think about the impact that, health and wellbeing has on teachers and our teaching population. And so it's time to get real. So we're going to have a real confronting conversation, Dean.
Oh, you're scaring me.
Time to get real. That's your specialty, get real. And because, the fact is, 2/3 of the adult population are obese.
Yeah, 2/3.
Yeah.
1 in 4 kids, probably closer to 1 in 3 kids is overweight now. The statistics are getting worse.
Yeah.
So it seems that everything that we think we know and everything that we've attempted to do to make a difference to this area has contributed to the problem, because the numbers are getting worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, okay, let's talk about you then and how you developed Simplr Health. Where did it start? Where's your passion? Because it's like, it is your business, but it's much more than that. You're committed to, real transformation in health.
Yeah, I've been helping people lose weight and handle their metabolic dysfunction. So I've had a focus on metabolic health and metabolic syndrome, which is a cluster of symptoms that includes high blood glucose, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and too much fat around the belly. So we call that central adiposity. So
so is anyone that's overweight, do they have metabolic syndrome, or is that?
So overweight would be defined as a BMI or body mass index above 25 and below 30.
Okay.
That's overweight.
Okay.
That's kind of the norm now. If you consider 2/3 of the adult population is overweight, that's just what we see every day.
Yeah.
Right. So when you get healthy and you lose all that weight, I'm sure you would have experienced people saying, you're too skinny.
Yeah.
Is there something wrong with you?
Yeah.
So
I got to about, I was still about 8 kilos away from my goal weight, and I wasn't even in the healthy weight range. Like, it was just above it, like nearly was. And I had people say, oh, that's enough. You look fine now. You don't have to lose anymore. And I was like, but what? I'm not even in the healthy weight range yet.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't take much for your facial structure to change.
Yeah.
When you think about, if you were to go to a cosmetic surgeon or a plastic surgeon, just a millimeter change makes an enormous difference to the structure and the look of your face. So if you lose all that mass around here, I mean, it's shocking for people when they see you, and particularly if you lose the weight during a period like 2020, where I emerged
like the phoenix from the ashes.
What?
It was like that. It was great. It was a great way to reveal. Really, I got the full impact. Actually, the best story was I went to work because everyone had been in lockdown. So I hadn't seen anyone. I hadn't seen someone for about a year. This was someone I'd worked with quite closely, and she had some health problems. So, so when I saw her, she said, I said, oh, hi, how are you? How are you going? And she goes, oh, hi, how are you? And just acted like she didn't know me. And I thought, oh no, she's got dementia, because she was older. And it was halfway through the conversation, she went, oh, I just realized who I was talking to. So that was best. That was the best reaction. Anyway, it's not all about me. Keep going.
Oh, goodness. So metabolic syndrome, I've had a commitment to handling and reversing that. And one of the other areas of expertise for myself is regenerative medicine.
Okay,
and pioneering cell therapies, stem cell therapies, in particular for degenerative tissue disorders like osteoarthritis.
Okay.
So for people who have osteoarthritic joints, and maybe you're too young to undergo total joint replacement surgery, but the pain and the joint dysfunction, immobility is just getting too much for you. What are your options? So pioneered some injection therapies that made a difference there. What was consistent as the patients used to come through the clinic and I would see them with my consulting clinical team is maybe 85–90% of them at least were overweight, had metabolic syndrome.
Right. And what age are these clients that you were seeing with? Is it all ages or?
Yeah, all ages. I mean, the ones that predominantly we were treating was somewhere between 45 and 70, like in that kind of bracket there. So why does the tissue in the joint degenerate? So this might be termed as bone on bone. The cartilage degenerates to that point. Now, there might have been some trauma where there's some instability in the joint. The ligaments are now lax, and so the joint doesn't move on a correct plane anymore. And that kind of further exacerbates the degenerative process. But it degenerates because it can't regenerate and heal properly in a background context of low-grade chronic inflammation. Where's that inflammation coming from? Well, crappy diets and too much fat around the belly. So I thought, let me take a step back and help people put the fire out first. It's like, you know, when we had the bushfires, you got to put the fires out first before you can start talking about regenerative practices to look after the bush, right? You got to put the fire out first. And in the case for us, it's too much insulin. Then the pandemic comes about, right? And so about a year ago, just a little bit more than a year ago, everyone was kind of like trying to figure out how they can best survive this pandemic and still look good. And, you know, all the opportunists were like, how can I profit from this? How can I pivot? And you know, or people were kind of just in shell shock and waiting to see. And it was the Easter weekend, I kind of decided, well, what could I do to contribute to people's safety, peace of mind, and what could I do to help, I don't know what we could do to end the pandemic, but at least provide new strategies to exit lockdown safely. So I have, my original background training was in biotechnology, specifically in emerging infectious diseases. So all of a sudden I have
you got these two talents that the world is
emerging infectious diseases and metabolic health, and people with metabolic dysfunction seem to be more at risk of severe symptomology when infected with COVID-19. So I became, I think, at least for myself, relevant, at least for those that I got to help, you know, in a more concentrated way. So in terms of immunometabolic protection, I came up with some structures that I think work and get the job done. And how do you educate people in a simpler way that leaves them with a say in the matter of their own health, rather than you at the effect of or waiting for the government and the pharmaceutical companies to figure it all out, and then you just have to do what you're told. What if the power of your own health was in your hands? And I think if there is going to be any real shift in health outcomes in the general population, it's going to be because we've empowered and enabled people, health consumers, to be accountable for their own well-being. But to be able to do that, you've got to be educated in the science. You've got to have your hands on the levers and dials of how your body works, and supported and coached along the way. It's a process.
And that was definitely the difference for me. Was now I feel like I know what food does, and that was a kind of embarrassing realization that I was, you know, 41 at the time, a teacher that works in tertiary education, that teaches teachers, but just had no idea about food, like really no idea, and just didn't have any understanding about why you eat certain food groups, except what, you know, the media tells you, or just very, and, you know, I take responsibility for that. I should have taken that on board, but just didn't know anything until I met you, and you started to coach me and teach me about, well, these are the different food groups. This is what they do, and this is why you should eat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from an education standpoint, it's powerful because you have an as lived experience of it.
Yeah.
So it's a right now application and experience of what you're learning. So it gets ingrained pretty quickly, and you can't get rid of that stuff now.
No.
You can't. What you've learned.
Yeah.
You've got it forever.
Yeah. Okay. So what is where do we go from here? So let's talk a bit about your program and why you developed it, or the science behind it, because the way that, you know, say the nutritional, you know, one of the things I've learned from you is that the nutritional pyramid is incorrect. The way we teach kids, even in schools, how to eat healthily is not correct. And that there are, you know, there's the way society and the context of society is set up for us that makes us, you know, leads us towards choices that aren't the best for us.
Yeah, when you say it's not correct, I mean, it's correct from a particular viewpoint.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So which viewpoint?
Yeah, okay.
Well, from industry, sure.
Yeah, right.
And there's been some influences over a really long period of time that have kind of directed the way that we teach our kids about food, the way that, or even the foods that get served in aged care facilities, in hospitals, what our armed forces get fed, all of this sort of stuff. So it's influenced both by industry and strangely enough, various religious groups as well.
Right.
And there's this undertone or influence in the background of the Dietitians Association of Australia, who wrote the Australian Dietary Guidelines. So there's a commitment now with the likes of Dr. James Mukey, for example, to reform the Australian Dietary Guidelines, and even the way in which some of these chronic diseases are related to, in particular type 2 diabetes, which now is just recently, Diabetes South Australia has changed the wording in their literature to say that type 2 diabetes is not just a progressive disease, it can be put into remission, so it can be reversed. So this is a big deal. It's all everything's created in language. And if you say it's a progressive disease, if someone's diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and they read that it's a progressive disease, then clearly there's nothing that they can do about it. They'll just resign themselves to, well, I'll just live the best life I can in whatever, you know, health or time I've got left, and enjoy it. And what do people enjoy? Eating all those types of foods. So the food pyramid that we're all kind of trained in, that was released by the USDA in 1992, carbohydrates was placed at the bottom, and fats were cut out of the diet. So
they were in the top little triangle, right?
Yeah, that's right.
With the little oil thing.
So that was based on the assumption that saturated fat intake increases the risk of heart disease. So it's very shaky.
We're just going to pause it. The kids are home. Well, okay, we had a little. Where were we?
What were we talking about? the food pyramid.
Food pyramid, little oil on the top.
So if you carb load
yes,
and cut fat out,
yeah,
on the assumption that it's high intake of fat that's causing heart disease, well, what happened is heart disease continued to rise.
Yeah.
So it's still the #1 killer.
Yeah.
And in fact, even beyond that, then there was this commitment to, okay, exercise is the answer.
Yeah.
So we just got to get people to exercise more. And this sedentary lifestyle is what's causing the ill health issues across the nation. So even the pedometer that measures the number of steps. There was
and your watches do it now too.
Well, those pedometers, there was a Japanese company that, in order to sell more pedometers, they just made up this story that you need to walk 10,000 steps a day. And the Australian government adopted that around 2000, 2001 in an attempt to just go, oh, screw it, let's just see if we can get people to move more. But that's not the answer either.
No. Well, that's what I find a lot of people say to me. So people who don't necessarily know, I don't know how they don't know, because I talk about it all the time. Like, know the program I did with you, but they go, oh, how many times do you go to the gym? Because they know I go to the gym, and so they think, oh, how many times do you go? Because they think that's the answer to their weight loss. And I have to always stop people and say, no, I was going to the gym for 1.5 years before I met Dean, and nothing was happening, or it did, and then I'd just put it back on again.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's diet that you have to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So there's some fundamentals that people need to understand around macronutrients and nutritional biochemistry and substrate partitioning and fuel utilization. So all this sort of stuff, these distinctions from that world, when would you have ever learned this?
No.
So that's what there is to kind of learn that enables you to be responsible for your own health and well-being and understand the foods and how to combine them and how much of it to eat and what to cut out. You know, there's this really lazy way of thinking, and people are lazy when it comes to thinking, because intellectual effort seems to be the worst kind of effort. It's like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. It's like, no, you won't.
That's right. Or you do it for a short period of time. Like those meal plans, you get the meal plan, and I was really good at it for 8 weeks and lost the weight. And then after the 8 weeks, because I didn't understand what was in the foods. Like why I didn't understand why I lost the weight. Yeah.
And if you lose a certain amount on any approach, if you just eat less, you cut sugar out, stop drinking soft drinks and juices and so forth, you'll lose some weight. And you can increase the calorie deficit by exercising a bit as well. Unfortunately, if you exercise too strenuously, that increases your appetite. So then you've got to be even more disciplined around your eating habits. So this is creates a very stressful environment to produce the results. So I started to work with some experts. It's like, how can we strip it all back, not buy into all the various nutritional philosophies and just biochemistry, just cells and molecules, and design an approach that not only works scientifically and it's scientifically validated and it's clinically proven, but I use a coaching approach that is quite distinct. And I have to make sure that when people lose the weight, there's the appropriate human being there at that ideal body weight that's mature enough and knowledgeable enough to manage that result long term.
And so tell listeners, like, how does it work? How does it, you know, I know how it works, but they don't know how it works.
You just do what I say.
I just do what you do. I just do what you say.
Do what I say and be curious. But the obviously, to lose weight, you got to eat less. You know, so you've got to eat less calories. But I created inside the coaching structure, there's an environment that gets created and you're challenged. Right. So there's kind of some rules and there's boundaries and there are certain parameters you got to stick within, and then you've got to figure it out. And I don't necessarily figure it out for you. You've got to do that yourself. So when placed in that environment to solve these fundamental problems, then your body adapts. And like I said, it gets ingrained because you figure it out. You know, it's not me telling you every little detail and holding your hand. So there's this adaptive reprogramming that happens, both metabolically. So your hormones rebalance, your body learns to be fueled on a lower caloric intake. But there are some other adaptations that happen. One is obviously your gut microbiome reconstitutes. Most of people's eating habits are driven by their gut microbiome. People think it's their love for the taste of the foods and the textures. No, here is like the smoke screen. Most of their eating behaviors are driven by these parasites in your gut.
Is that something new that science has discovered, or have you known that for a while?
I think there was some understanding that that was maybe the case, but as you know, our education, scientific education, kind of expands, then you know, we're learning more and more around the reality of that. It makes sense. There are some examples in nature where, for example, a parasite in fish takes over its brain function basically and influences it to swim closer to the surface of the water, which leaves it at more open to be prey to birds. So then the birds can catch the fish, and then and eat the fish and be infected with that parasite and then fly to distant bodies of water.
Yeah.
And, its feces then infects that water, which infects fish, causes them to swim closer to the surface of the water. So this parasite can get around.
Wow.
Right? There's even some examples where a parasite from cats, a feline parasite, can infect humans, and it has distinct kind of alters behavior, and it's distinct between male and female. So when this cat parasite goes from cats to humans, in men, it causes men to be more untidy. I'm not making this up. And women,
they're going to be using this excuse now. It's not me, it's the parasite.
It's the cats.
The cats. I think with me, my husband, it's the opposite though. I think I have the male one. I'm the untidy one.
I won't say any more about that. Who wears the pants?
Funny.
So, look, there's obviously the brain has to adjust.
Yeah.
And rewire the brain. Your central nervous system learns how to be fueled by ketones rather than always just glucose.
Yeah.
Still requires some glucose, but you don't need to eat carbohydrates.
No, so that's like such a fault. People think you need to eat carbohydrates to be full as well. And so, but what does excess carbohydrates do with insulin and things?
Yeah, well, causes obesity.
Yeah.
So, there's carbohydrate kind of diet. And it's influenced because we're such a sporty nation as well. It's how come a third of us are obese? Right. So, well, when you look at athletes, it's a distinct phenomenon with athletes where we call it the athlete's paradox, where they would eat, several thousands worth of calories every day. Ian Thorpe would consume minimum 6,000 calories a day.
Yeah.
Right. But you can't eat like that. That was back when he was immortal. Now he's mortal. He can't eat like that anymore, right? So the athlete's paradox doesn't apply for the majority of people, and you can't be, in the gym on the treadmill working your butt off and your butt's not coming off. Why? Because you're sipping Gatorade at the same time. And the glucose in the Gatorade is blunting fat oxidation. So it's preventing your body from tapping into your own fat reserves. Right? What's useful in the Gatorade is the salt, not the glucose.
Right.
But we're addicted to thinking that it's the sweet stuff, the calorie dense chocolate bars, they're going to give us energy. If you're a mountaineer climbing Mount Everest, but that ain't you or I. So
no, not you and I at all. Okay. So, all right. So 2/3 of us are overweight, a third of us are obese. So that means in the teaching population, 2/3 of teachers are
at least overweight. Yep.
And a third of them would be obese.
Talking to kids about managing their well-being.
So how's that working for us? Not very well.
No.
And so tell me about the impact that poor diet just has on performance. And I know you work with a range of professionals. So as people are losing the weight, what's also occurring for them in terms of their performance in work and what they're up to?
Yeah, you just got to look at what happens mid-afternoon after you have a sandwich and a juice for lunch. Right. So each slice of bread would be the equivalent of about 4 to 5 teaspoons of sugar. So there's 10 teaspoons of sugar just in the bread from the sandwich. You wash it down with the juice. You have a small piece of fruit. So you've spiked your blood glucose levels pretty high. For most people, that would occur as a pretty healthy lunch. That's what kids are getting fed at school. That's what they're getting taught is a healthy lunch. So your blood glucose levels spike. Your pancreas then releases all of this insulin to lower your blood glucose levels. Because it's such a high amount of blood glucose, your pancreas releases a really high amount of insulin. And then it brings it down, but then it brings it down too low. So then about 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
school pickup time.
Right? You're looking for that next sugar fix because your blood glucose levels are too low. And if you think about people in the workplace, when mid-afternoon, you're trying to be productive to get stuff done before the end of the workday. And you're irritable, you've got brain fog, you're lethargic, and this is where, you can't work as a team because then you just don't want to communicate to anyone other than get the heck out of my way or get me a Tim Tam, right? So
yeah.
then you're not as productive and your workday extends and then you get home late.
Yeah.
And then that impacts your experience of being at home and also your family's experience of you. And then our kids kind of wear that and they bring that into the schools and the community.
Yeah.
And it plays on and on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not pretty. And then even if you're a teacher and you're spiking your insulin, and so you've got brain fog and lethargy, you're not sleeping well, and so you're over reliant on stimulants like caffeine.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Yeah.
You're stuck in here.
Yeah.
You're not out here with the students that you're entrusted to teach and educate. So there's no compassion or limited compassion.
Yeah.
Even though you're unbelievably committed to providing that for the people that you're educating, you're just not there able to provide that for them if you don't look after your well-being and eat properly.
But that would be happening in the morning, right? Like a typical kind of breakfast would be cereals and things, the toast. So does that spike happen in the morning too? Because I'm kind of thinking about like school staff rooms where when you walk in and there's often like cakes and muffins and stuff for recess and morning.
Yeah, people are eating sugar all through the day. So if you wake up, you're having Nutella on toast. So sugar and fat on sugar. Yeah. And then mid-morning, there's the morning tea phenomenon with cakes and biscuits and so forth. And it's just sugar, sugar.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you're having that kind of lunch that we just talked about. And then you try and get your blood sugar levels back up mid-afternoon. You'll have biscuits and fruit. And then at dinner, you might eat healthfully and have the majority of your protein in that evening meal.
Yeah.
So most people eat the majority of their protein towards the evening meal. They live inside of this belief that most of your carbs should be consumed in the middle of the day. Yeah. And the understanding that you'll burn it off in the afternoon, it just doesn't work that way.
Not by just standing around. Like teachers would be, I guess, relatively more active in terms of they're standing up in the classroom all the time, but that's still not going to burn off the carbs you have at breakfast and lunch.
No, no. So, you know, the average Australian consumes about 42 kilograms of sugar every year.
Wow.
Now, you got to remember that sugar is a disaccharide. So you've got a glucose molecule connected to a fructose molecule. And our body knows how to deal with glucose. So it stimulates insulin, and insulin causes our cells, our skeletal muscle, our fat tissue, our liver to do something with that glucose. Yeah. But fructose, our body doesn't know what really to do with it. It just accumulates in the liver. Okay. And then we end up with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Right.
So 2/3 of the adult population are at risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Wow. And is that just obese people, or can skinny people get that?
Yeah, skinny fat people, we call them. Yeah. So, and this is, so you've got this excess amount of fructose, plus you've got the glucose stimulating all this insulin. So insulin is not just a glucose regulator. Insulin also stimulates the growth of cells, including precancerous cells. So that's why obesity is a risk factor for certain cancers. Okay. Right. It also stimulates the vascular endothelial growth factor, which is a molecule that causes new blood vessel formation. So if you've got a tumor forming, how do the cells in the middle of the tumor, the cancerous cells in the middle of the tumor, survive? Well, it's got to create some vasculature to provide nutrients and oxygen. Right. Insulin helps to stimulate all of that as well. Okay. Yeah. So this is like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, dementia, cancer, those 5. If you're overweight/obese, it's not a matter of, you know, there being an increased risk of one of those 5. It's just pick one, and it's, you know, and then when it'll happen soon.
I think you said that to me quite early in one of our first calls, and that was a real wake-up call for me too, to go, it's not if you'll get it, it's like when you'll get it. Like if you just stay obese, then as you said, which one? And for me, it probably would have been heart disease and diabetes because that's in my family. Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to deal with that as early as possible, because the longer you remain overweight, obese, the more your brain atrophies. So you end up with degeneration in the brain and the earlier onset of neurodegenerative disorders such as dementia.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so teachers, like, you know, are in this kind of stressful environment, particularly because we are, you know, constantly called on to solve world problems, right? You know, any world problem that comes, oh, let's put it in schools, we'll, you know, fix it. And it's one of the things that frustrates me as a teacher, like, you know, recently the consent, you know, we should teach consent in schools, that'll solve the problem. And diet's one of those things that I often read, well, if we educate the kids, you know, if we educate the kids about the diet, then, you know, that will solve our obesity crisis. But the problem is the kids are being taught about nutrition. I mean, firstly, not scientifically correct anyway, but they're being taught this by 2/3 of their teachers are overweight. And so kids aren't stupid. So what are they actually taking in what we're teaching them?
No, and it's hard for them to hear any of it because they're so jacked up on sugar themselves.
Yeah, right.
Right. So, and food is used as a treat, a reward, to console. You know, it's just everywhere. I mean, I take my daughter to ballet. Her ballet teacher gives her, you know, sugary treats at the end of the lesson. Then I take her to tennis, and it's like we're encouraging them to do all these activities, and then the people that are teaching them are giving them more sugar. So it's kind of counteracting the whole thing. And their brains get wired. So, you know, it was bad enough for us. You know, where we weaned off the breast. If we were breastfed, and then they kept feeding us dairy. And dairy is like one of the rare places in nature where sugar and fat are found together. Ordinarily, they're not found together. You get protein and fat, and protein and carbs, like in legumes and so forth. But you never see, you know, carbohydrates and fat together like that, except in dairy. And so when we were breastfeeding, that was the safest, most nourishing, nurturing place in the universe. And now, as adults, when we're stressed and overwhelmed, they're the kinds of foods that we turn to. Reminds our brain of that safe place. So it's even worse now for the younger generation. Teenagers consume the most amount of sugar, all the demographics, combined with less activity, combined with excess screen time. So, you know, they're kind of screwed, right? You can't tell. And plus,
these are these leaders I've been talking about in all these podcasts. With tomorrow's leaders, they're just like jacked up on sugar.
There's a phenomenon called inconsequential kids. And these in I think either Ireland or Northern Ireland, they saw an increased number of kids that were showing up in accident and emergency. And they were like, what's going on here? So they termed them inconsequential kids, that even at ages where you would think that they should know better, still running out on the road chasing a ball and not concerning themselves that if a car hits them, it hurts, right? And then they examined what's distinct about these kids, and they looked at their diets, and they were protein malnourished. So you need a certain amount of protein for your brain to lay down the kind of patterns to determine consequences. And so this is this is what we're dealing, and we can't invalidate them. When as a teacher you think it's all knowledge based, you just got to tell them what to do and they'll do it. No, they don't listen to anyone. So you got to create an environment where they see that's what there is to do. And when educators and teachers actually take that well-being on themselves, then they've got something personal and more powerful to share and gift to the younger generation. It's not a matter of just like saying you should, because you know what it's like. You get to 11 and it's like, don't tell me what to do. Right? And people hold on to that until they're, you know, well into their elderly years. And they see us like, you know, we could say, don't have that soft drink, don't have that, you know, don't have that soft drink, don't have that juice. But then they're seeing us having, you know, a glass or two of wine at night as well. And they know, they're not stupid. They know that wine and that isn't healthy. Well, my daughter, I buy her non-alcoholic wine. And she sits there and she has a glass with me. Okay. So it's not, I'm not hypocritical. I teach her about the distinctions of wine chemistry. I teach her how you know, the antioxidants are liberated from the grape skins, and the difference between her wine and my wine, and why she can't have it, and what happens with excessive alcohol consumption on the brain. Why do I still consume a little bit? Because it's dose dependent.
Yeah, right.
So we've got to think scientifically about this, and you got to think from context. You got to understand dose, and also temporality.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So look, Dean, it's a big problem. You know, we have these teachers who they're struggling, they're stressed, they're overweight, and their diet's crappy. They feel like they have no time. And so the other thing with diet, the one thing that I found was that a lot of my mental health issues started to correct themselves too.
Yeah.
Like I used to deal with quite severe anxiety, which I kind of dealt with through a psychologist, but came back when COVID hit, you know, like a steam train. But what I noticed that when I started to change my diet and started to introduce healthy food, then my mental health started to, and I think it was working with you too, and the coaching and everything definitely was part of it. But diet must play in, you know, important part of that too.
If you remove some of these excitotoxins, such as excessive glucose consumption, alcohol, and even extreme strenuous exercise. You know, people love to do this exercise because it makes them feel good. Makes you feel good compared to what? The rest of your life? Well, I'd be handling that first. Rather than buying yourself off with, but I'm addicted, but it's a good addiction. It's an addiction's an addiction, and it is an addiction. So there's something underneath all of that that needs to be handled, kind of examined, without any invalidation of oneself. You can just kind of look at it. And you know, when I have patients and clients that lose a lot of weight, like tens of kilograms of weight, you know, 50 kilograms, you got to sustain them on this program for long enough to lose all of that weight. How can you do that? And they don't deviate at all. They don't go, you know, they go from being addicted to pizza and iced coffee and alcohol, and then they don't have any of that. If you're not stimulating your brain with these excitotoxins, stimulants, and then suppressants, and then you've got a better chance of being more regulated and disciplined along the way. You start spiking it, you throw those things back in the mix, you're going to be up and down like a yo-yo. It's harder to manage your not just mood, but your performance. People become erratic, sporadic, impulsive, demanding, and their expectations are so far beyond what's realistic. And you know, so when I work with people, we bring it all down, and people start to get some facility with their biology. And when you can start to master your biology, you also have to take on mastering your internal state. You know, your thoughts and memories, your mental state, your emotional state, your body sensations. You have some mastery over all of that versus all of that running the show. And when you can master your biology and your internal state, you've got a greater opportunity set to be out here, present to life, dealing with what's actually happening, including if you're entrusted to, you know, educate, train, and develop the younger generation, then you're actually out here with them, present to what they're dealing with, rather than pointing the finger at them, you know, because they're already resentful. They've got to deal with the problems that we've created. We've made that their mess.
They're already annoyed, and our generation isn't doing much about it. So then, if we, because what was the rate, like how many people did we lose last year in the COVID-19 pandemic? Like in terms of lives lost?
About 1,000.
About 1,000 in Australia. And so how many deaths were there due to obesity?
Well, due to type 2 diabetes, it was 15 times that. So 15,000. And so we have this pandemic response, you know, to coronavirus appropriately, but we need that sort of response to our health and well-being. Like more people are dying from obesity-related diseases than there ever has been with the pandemic here in Australia. So it's not, but look, you know, I'll be so bold to say it, fat people are winning. You know, fat people can, you know, play the victim. You go, don't fat shame me, and you hurt my feelings, and I'm offended. I've got surgeons that tell me, Dean, I just don't even want to talk to my patients about their weight. I try to explain to them, if you lose the weight and reduce the inflammation, you're going to recover better from the surgery. And I had one surgeon tell me that the patient reported into the medical board, made a complaint saying that he fat shamed her, right? So now he just doesn't want to talk to his patients. He's reluctant to. And I said, well, you have to. You're a doctor. It's your job. So even they're being kind of constrained in their opportunity set to impact it and make a difference. Right. And there's a lot of education that doctors need around that area as well. I mean, you can't just keep doing bariatric surgery, you know, to deal with a nutritional, you know, issue.
And we do take a lot of excuses. Like, I was just, you know, talking to a friend who's a client of yours the other day, and we were saying, you know, the kind of, it's all set up for us too. There is this, you know, and I get it a bit now too, like, don't you just want to have one cake, or one's okay, and you can work it off in the gym, and there's this whole concept of like, it's okay to slip, and it's like, maybe it's just not okay anymore.
No.
Well, it was never okay.
No.
And we've got to stop giving ourselves these excuses all the time. Like, it's not okay to eat that, you know.
Got to create a new movement instead of just, are you okay? You've got to create not okay.
It's not okay.
You know, and it's,
you're not okay.
It's not okay. Well, it's not,
I'm telling you, you're not okay.
It's not okay to fail.
No.
You know, and if you give your word to something, and you've got an environment that's telling you it's okay to fail, like you got to create some structures, put some structures in place. You can't invalidate those people. People don't know, right? But you got to put some structures in place to support yourself to fulfill on your word. And that's often what's missing. It's like you got to just make a promise, and how you transform is you do whatever it takes to fulfill on that promise. And then you discover who you need to be, and that discovery you get to keep forever, and that's what will empower you to sustain that kind of result long term. But you know, it's not okay to fail, and we make it okay to fail all the time. We make it okay for ourselves to fail, and we jump on that bandwagon of being a coward, right? But it's not okay when you get on a plane. It's not okay for the pilot to fail.
No.
I mean, if you get on the operating table, is it okay for your surgeon to fail? No. So why is it okay for you to fail at what you're committed to? Now, at the same time, you got to be mature about this. It's not okay to fail, and will you fail from time to time? And what does that mean? Nothing. So you got to play the game like it's not okay to fail, and when you do fail, it's like, so what? Keep playing.
And work and also work out why. You know, like what was it that, you know, as you say, you know, you don't just sneeze and all of a sudden you eat a piece of pizza. It's like, there are like steps to it. You know, you rang out, you ordered it can't, you know, you waited, it came, you opened up the pizza box, you know, you picked up and you took the first bite and the second and the third.
That's right.
You know, there's so many spots where you could have stopped and just said no.
I had this client, he rang me one time, and he was like being overly nice and overly interested in me and how my day was. And I was like, what's going on? What have you done? He goes, what do you mean? I said, you deviated, you cheated. Like, and he goes, oh, you know, don't you? I said, it's like, you're not usually this pleasant. So and
he shook a pizza.
I said, what did you do? He goes, I had pizza. I go, how much? And he said, 5. I said, you ate 5 slices of pizza? He said, Dean, I ate 5 pizzas.
Like 5 pizzas?
Right? So I was fascinated. I was like, how does this play out? Right? So you have, firstly, you got to buy 5 pizzas. Right? You didn't buy them. They were just all kind of laid out, right? And they weren't big pizzas. They were, but still medium-sized pizzas. And he had one, and he knew he'd gone off track. Right. And he just sold out. The voice in his head said, oh, you've screwed it. And he just went, well, I may as well royally screw it. And I said, okay, I get that. There's a logic to it. And I said, was it good? And he goes, oh, it was awesome. I said, up until what point? And that's when he said, you know what? Probably halfway through the second slice. And I said, and you kept going.
That's so interesting.
Right? It's crazy. Anyway, he didn't do that again.
So. Well, then he learnt why, and that's kind of the thing, right? You've got to be responsible. So you might slip up, but then you can't just go, oh, that's okay, and paper over it. It's like kind of being responsible for why and
that's why the coaching structure, because the coach doesn't let you quit.
No.
Right. And ordinarily, without that kind of commitment, that's ordinarily you just throw your hands up in the air and go, oh. And then it becomes another example of how, you make a failure mean that you are a failure. No, you just failed at that game, or your commitment's still there. You just kind of, your performance went off track a little bit, and the coach is designed, or the coach is committed and trained in being able to bring you back on track. So over time, you end up where you say you want to be versus selling out earlier. And it's also important to go 100% of the way, not 80%. Oh, I'm happy with where I'm at. It's like, then you never discover who you need to be in that last 5%. And that's what people deprive themselves of, is the opportunity to transform and discover who they get to be in that last little bit. And when you can say, 65 kilograms, and you get to 65 kilograms, I mean, there's a whole world of accomplishment that no one ever can take away from you. And you're far less likely to let that go, right? But even then, I still don't trust people with their body, and I keep them on a stabilization program to lock it in.
Because I started towards the end, to relate to myself a bit like an addict. Because it was, and, just like alcoholics, call themselves alcoholics for the rest of their life, even when they're not drinking, I kind of started to think, well, I've got to think in that way. Like, that's how important it is for me to make sure I've got it all like sorted, and not just relax about it. If you have a propensity to operate with lacks of integrity in any particular area in your life, then you ought to put some structures in place to be managed or manage yourself in that area for the rest of your life without any loss of power. It's just, it's kind of like if you've got a chronic disease and you have to take a medication, you just keep taking that medication. It's, there are certain foods I just don't have in my place. I don't buy them, because if they're accessible, I'll eat them. I don't trust myself. So I just make sure I manage my environment and the accessibility of all of that. So there is a process of growing up. Yes, definitely.
And, we have these juvenile ways of being and acting that stay with us. It's like, well, I like my chocolate, and everyone's like, well, my problem is blah, blah, blah. And I just love food too much. No, you abuse food. That you can't tell me you love food when you abuse it to that degree. So, there's not only a process of growing up, there's also an understanding that your body does not belong to you.
Those two things I think you said in our first conversation was, you said to me, at one point, you just have to grow up and eat your vegetables. And I had this image of me trying to get my daughter to eat her vegetables, and me realizing that I wasn't eating my vegetables. And I realized, wow, I'm being a child. Like, I'm being a child about this, and it's time to grow up.
But imagine if you're being that way, then telling children to eat their vegetables, you're a bully. That's
true. It is.
I'm just kidding. But it's kind of like that. Like my daughter, she eats all the vegetables and loves them, right? Never did anything in particular about the vegetables. We just put them on her plate and we ate them ourselves. And so in her occurring world, it's not significant. And it's just what there is to do. So she would just, at some point, just kind of trusted it. But if you're like, broccoli, yum. And the kids, they're going, you're not talking about the chicken like this. It's like, what's up with this green stuff? Sounds a bit sus.
Right? It doesn't look like to be too much green stuff on your plate. Dad. Where's your green stuff?
That's right.
Well, it's a big problem. And I think part of why I wanted to bring you on the podcast was to get real teachers. It starts with us. We keep talking about changing students and changing what we're teaching, but what are we doing ourselves? And we can't argue with biology, and we can't keep making these excuses anymore. And BMI is right. Let's not keep making excuses about the BMI, and the BMI is not reflective of all body types, blah, blah thing. You know, it is a big range, so you should be able to fit in that big range, I think, most body types. So look, if we want to transform education, it starts with us, and I think it starts with our health. So thank you all for listening and staying with us. Thank you so much, Dean, for coming on.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If you are interested in Dean's program, you can find him on Facebook, Dean Kilby, or on his website, Simplr Health. Just Google SIMPLR Health and you will find him, or get in touch with me and I'll pass you on to Dean. And or any questions at all, please reach out. I'd love to hear what you think we can do in education to transform health. So this has been another episode of Teaching Heroes, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.